Today we have on board Devyani Singha, who holds a bachelor's and master's degree in clinical psychology, and she's done her MSc in child and adolescent mental health from the University of Northampton. And she's also a certified graphologist and who's practicing currently in Delhi and is counseling people and helping people with psychological issues in the COVID and post-COVID scenario. It's great to have you on board, Devyani. And the first thing we start off today is by checking on how are you doing. And this is also for our audience, just closing eyes and figuring out how we are feeling. Let's do that as an exercise. Thank you. So before we say how we feel, the most important thing is we feel alive. And that, I guess, is the most important thing. And when we say we are alive, it also means it is possible for us to do anything that we want to and bring about any kind of change to make our lives better. So on that note, Devyani, we are locked up in homes or forced to work from home, which is again creating a lot of physical and mental problems. In terms of the quarantine fatigue that seems to be on the rise now, how does that impact our behavior and how risky it is for us to not address it?
Since 2020, millions of people around the world have been experiencing this collective trauma since the onset of COVID 19. Regardless of age, gender, nationality, or socioeconomic class, we all are facing isolation, which is both physical and social. That individuals with pre existing mental health issues have had a more negative reaction to this isolation. But there are many government monitored helplines which are now available. There are a lot of resources which are also being circulated online, which will have tragic and fatal consequences. It is also very important to understand that the situation we are in and that what we're dealing with is actually a real problem. Despite all the controversy and conspiracy theories, the fact that people are getting infected and in some cases dying is a reason enough to acknowledge that the danger is there. So we need to start accepting our responsibilities, and very crucial is having the patience to see this through, which will eventually pass, but we have to keep on taking these adequate precautions to keep us and our near ones healthy and in good spirit as well, so that at the end of it, we do emerge much stronger at the end of the storm which we are currently facing.
How should we name emotions? Let's start by looking at a list of emotions. First, notice the emotions at the top in the too broad, don't use category. Happy, mad, sad, bad. These emotions are really just symptoms of the more specific emotions below and don't help us really understand what is going on. Here's an example. A child just told her mother a lie. On the surface, the mom might feel angry. That is obvious to anyone who is around her. She might start yelling or giving out a punishment. But the anger is just a symptom of deeper, more specific emotions. Usually, we have at least 3 at any one point in time. Let's look at some that might have led this parent to anger. First, the parent might be feeling frustrated that the child would lie when she has been taught that lying is wrong. Second, the parent might be feeling worried that this may be an indication that she isn't a good enough mom. So the specific emotions of frustration and worry came out as the surface emotion of anger. Let's look at another situation. In this case, a teen failed his driver's license test. On the surface, he just seems sad. But what specific underlying feelings might the teen have? He might feel overwhelmed with all the errors the driving instructor pointed out. Disappointed because he was so excited to drive his friends to the movies tonight. Nervous that he might fail again next time and how hard that would be to admit that to his friends. So the specific emotions of being overwhelmed, disappointed, and nervous were expressed as a surface emotion of sadness. This works when we name our own emotions and when we name it for others.
By helping and encouraging others to name their emotions too, we can use our logical brain to help their logical brain calm down the other parts.
Naming emotions for others is the number one way to build a deep bond with our loved ones, which is one reason why we really need to learn this skill.
And when we say emotions, there's this concept that you've mentioned, which was very interesting, on emotional labeling. And perhaps wrongful labeling of emotions is one of the major concerns. And that leads to a lot of problems within us perceiving situations. And the perceived stress seems to be more severe than the actual stress.
Yes, so emotions is a very vast topic, and this is something that we experience every single moment of our life. Yet, we do not fully understand how we are perceiving each emotion in the right manner. As in everything, we draw conclusions on reference based or in the set of labels that we have already pre established. And this also applies to our emotion as we feel it saves us a lot of time and wherein labeling pitches in for research and understanding, which is a very large concept. So we are aware of our very primary emotions. So if I also ask you to, to name a few emotions, you would come up with sad, happy, angry. These are the general terms that we use. But our emotions are really not that simple in nature or basic. When we talk about, let's talk about rage, bitter, jealousy, annoyance. Will you actually believe me that they're all offsets of anger? Different intensities in different contexts, but they all stem from just one emotion, anger. So when emotions are so diverse and we have assigned so many different levels to them, it's very normal and it's very easy to label them incorrectly. And this term is actually called affect labeling, which is as simple as putting feelings into words. And I just mentioned that, it's not that easy, it's not that simple. So when we're unable to identify these emotions correctly, it has a direct consequence on how we respond to them. It also has an impact on our emotional regulation as well. This can sometimes create a lot of difficulties in relationships, which can be personal or in work. And during these very difficult times, our emotions are mixing up. There's a tendency for them to get mixed. So just a small example, so you can imagine also, you might be starving, which has reduced your blood sugar, and you have been constantly working, and then suddenly your boss calls and finds out some mistake that you have made. So all you can feel is, I'm very irritated, I'm very angry. But now what you've actually done, you've incorrectly labeled your emotion as a negative emotion.
You've got mail.
associated with labeling is increased stress. So stress, though it is one of the most hackneyed discussion points, it is nonetheless more important and relevant in the current scenario. So how do we look at stress from the viewpoint?
So, we're all experiencing stress almost every day of our life. And, I think you would also agree every time you're talking to somebody or picking up the phone, everybody's saying, I am so stressed out. I'm feeling so stressed. So, let's understand stress first, what it actually entails. So, stress has a direct impact on our physical and our mental well being at the same time. So stress is our body's flight or fight response to a situation. Small amount of stress is actually okay and important for us to achieve our task in our day-to-day life. But then there's too much of stress, which causes distress and can lead to cardiovascular diseases, binge eating and eating disorders, insomnia, fatigue, mood swings, compromised immune system, stomach issues, and this is not even an exhaustive list. So you
Exhaustive.
can understand. Yeah, exactly. So when we're in a constant state of stress, our body is continuously producing cortisol hormone. So that is the stress hormone, which has very bad long-term consequences, whereas ill consequences in the longer duration. So now that we've understood how stress impacts our body, it's very important to understand that what do we mean by some stress is okay, too much of it is too bad. So how do we know and identify where exactly are we on the spectrum of stress? So I think I'll just give you a few statements. If you identify with them, then we'll discuss further. So yeah, so maybe you're feeling overwhelmed easily, feeling like you're losing control of situations, becoming irritated and agitated easily, feeling worthless and dejected even after achievements, feeling like avoiding others and conversations with them, use of substances, feeling confused or lost, and a general poor judgment. So, if you're identifying with most of them, that means you're experiencing really high levels of stress, which is not healthy. As you can already tell, that stress causes a number of changes inside and outside, and it is very detrimental to your overall well being as well. Um, yeah. The impact could be immediate, acute, or chronic, but the outcome is always harmful. And I think that is why it has got this nickname. It's called the silent killer for a reason. It slowly creeps in, it slowly, causes these ill consequences. So, this is something we need to be very aware about moving forward.
Way to handle stress is first by accepting and becoming aware that there is stress, and then accordingly seeking help or trying to find methods or strategies to cope with it. And on the deadly combination that we are facing now, on one side we have the quarantine fatigue, on the other side we are having extraordinary stress levels because of various reasons, and again we have wrongful labeling. So the three seems to form a really deadly combination. So how do we decipher, and how do we handle it from a step-by-step process?
Hmm. So yeah, as you just mentioned, it is a very deadly combination. Three things coming up at the same time in high levels and high intensity. So when we are experiencing chronic stress, which is long term, we do go through a lot of difficulties in our cognitive processes, which will affect our judgment, planning, focus, interaction, execution skills, etc. So now with that, we add in wrong emotional labeling. So now these two things are directly impacting your behavior. And also, as you mentioned, quarantine fatigue. So you add that tiredness also, which is mental in nature. So we are completely exhausted mentally. So the best way to describe it would be to give everyone an example right now. So again, I would ask all of you to, imagine you are stressed for weeks and weeks for some project. You're facing one roadblock after the other, and you're not seeing any way out. plus you're stuck at home, in that same environment, in that same work from home situation. Um, and then a friend calls you, um, that he or she has been doing good. So rather than being happy for his or her well-being, you might feel some negative emotion, okay, wherein you assume that his or her life is better than yours and they're doing good and you're not doing so well. This prolonged stress can lead to more negative emotions in terms of the intensity kind of increases, and then you are stuck in this very vicious cycle of anxiety and sadness and all the things that you really don't want to be feeling at this point of time, where you're so emotionally drained out as well. So if all these three things are constantly there, then people will be feeling very emotionally drained and not understanding what is exactly happening to them. So it's very necessary to keep our stress levels in check. Again, start paying attention to our emotions and moods, so that we become more conscious and aware of our emotional state. Now that, like you also mentioned, once we start becoming more conscious, we can take appropriate steps. So I think that's really important.
How do you know when it's time to sleep or time to wake up in the morning? More powerful than any alarm clock are your own circadian rhythms, 24-hour cycles of biological processes that exist in every living thing. They keep your body functioning on schedule, day and night, wherever you are. And the key to it all is a bunch of cells in the retina of the eye called photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. Whilst the eye's rod and cone cells are responsible for vision, these retinal ganglion cells detect the brightness of our surroundings and send that information through the optic nerve to the suprachiasmatic nuclei, the brain's master clock. The master clock coordinates all the tiny clocks that govern the behaviour of the cells throughout the body. Taking light as its cue, the master clock determines a continuous cycle of physiological changes within our cells, including the production of hormones that prepare our bodies for waking and sleeping hours. Experiments show that when a person is kept entirely in the dark, their circadian rhythm hardly alters, keeping more or less to a 24-hour day. But seeing too much or too little light, or receiving light at the wrong times of day, can leave the master clock confused as to the time of day. This upsets the rhythm of our cells and impacts on our health and well-being. It's a real problem for people who work at night, those with sleep disorders, and also those with certain visual impairments that prevent light reaching those light-detecting ganglion cells. Studies have shown that disruptions to our natural rhythms put an extraordinary strain on the body, increasing the risk of a number of serious diseases, including cancer, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and depression. It can also impair your ability to think.
Wrong labeling and stress have an underlying impact on the outcomes. The circadian rhythm, or the general physiology and the physiological responses that we have, as well as the energy systems within the body, how does that get impacted in our regular behavior? Plus, does it also impact the circadian rhythm and the energy systems? If so, to what extent does it impact?
Yes, this is very integral. So we'll first discuss what exactly circadian rhythm is, so that everybody understands. So circadian rhythm, in very simple language, is our body's internal clock, and it has a direct link to our homeostasis, sleep, temperature, hormones. Circadian rhythm has been linked with obesity, diabetes, depression, sleep disorder, etc. Imbalance in your circadian rhythm has also shown that it can lead to low productivity, confusion, poor judgment, and a very general sense of despair. And again, you get caught up in the cycle of self-blame and guilt as well. So, not a very good impact to have on your bodily system. Now more than ever, we are actually seeing a major problem with everyone about the quantity and quality of sleep. People are sleeping when they're supposed to be working, they are awake when they should be resting, and All this in psychological research has been traced back to two aspects. One is bad sleep hygiene, and the second is work life imbalance. So, touching upon the lifestyle, it has been generally deteriorating over a period of time. On an average, people are constantly working for 16 to 18 hours a day, not having enough exercise, being sleep deprived or oversleeping also in many cases, and then they're spending hours of binge watching, net surfing, and just being on social media platforms for hours and hours. And sadly, all of this gets glorified also on your, social media, which only adds up to the toxicity of the issue. So people are hyping that, we are working for so many hours, we did not sleep today, I did a all-nighter. So this is all not very healthy for our bodily system. I feel
Right.
it's very integral for companies, rich individuals to focus on their self-care, and create programs which can help them understand body mechanism better. Seeing young adults are reaching stages of burnout in months, which usually takes for them to to experience. Some people don't ever experience burnout also, but now it's becoming very common in today's youth. Now again, COVID has a very direct impact also on our cardiovascular system, our respiratory system, our memory, blood function as well. Um, the overall impact is not really fully understood. To brace ourselves much better for this long fight that we have in front of us.
Right. Given that the scenario is not going to change anytime soon, and even if it changes, it's going to be episodic and not
Mm.
something that is going to be a normal. And if there's a normalcy, that is going to become something called as the new normal, which we don't know what exactly it is. In that scenario, how does one maintain a sense of sanity and a balance between work life, and also given that there's continued social distance, how can interpersonal relationships be established in a manner which can become conducive for people to work in the format that we are forced to?
These self-help techniques are not substitute for professional medical advice from doctors, from their psychologist or their psychiatrist. There are some techniques that if you adopt in a routine will have a positive impact on your life. Help technique is start writing down your daily emotions. Second is practicing meditation. 5-minute guided meditation, which is
Right.
very easily available online. Third is start being mindful of your actions and becoming more conscious of your choices professionally and personally. Being very observant when you're eating. So, take up 10 minutes of the day to just have your lunch or breakfast or dinner. Social distancing, best way to overcome it is perhaps join a forum or a platform which have similar profile people to you, where you feel that it can become a good community. It can be a social support group as well. Constantly working, and that's when we reach our burnout. So I would like to suggest everybody to take one day off in a week.
Our brain requires a great deal of energy to operate, particularly when we have to concentrate and think about something. Problem solving or making a decision not only uses more brain energy, it also can be a slow process. So our brain seeks to conserve energy by developing efficient ways of operating. One way it does this is through conscious and subconscious processing. Our brain seeks to automate much of what we do to save us time and brain energy. These are our brain's subconscious processes. They take care of our basic life functioning, our fight or flight response, and our learned behaviors and habits. We don't really think about these things, they just happen on autopilot or it becomes second nature. In fact, up to 95% of all our behaviors and reactions happen at the subconscious level. Our subconscious is also involved in the recording and storing of our experiences and knowledge, forming our memories. These are stored in our brain like photos in a picture album, which we can refer back to later. The way we think and feel about these experiences forms a frame around the photo. This is how we give people, objects, or events meaning. Over time, this is how our attitudes develop. For the most part, our subconscious processes help us navigate the world efficiently. Yet sometimes we might develop unhelpful habits or attitudes that prevent us from achieving our goals. This is where more conscious thinking can benefit us. Our conscious processing involves our higher thinking capacity, where we can be more mindful and considered in what we think, feel, and do. We can use conscious thinking to reprogram our subconscious and change our thoughts, attitudes, and habits. While thinking consciously takes more energy, it is how we take greater control of our brain and achieve our goals.
Just summarize from my point of view, you are insisting on people having these rituals, basically, and that rituals transform into habits, and the habits become your actual self. So in that sense, it's a very important aspect to start off from journaling, because by journaling, you're at least becoming aware of what are the activities and how are you responding to different situations and scenarios. And on hindsight, for most of the situations that any one of us react, if we look at it again from a different point of view, it seems that we have overreacted most of the times. And stress is 90% perceived, and only 10% of the times it actually manifests into the reality that we fear. And when you said mindfulness, it's very, very apt that mindfulness has to be, and when you gave the example of people starting mindfulness with focusing on the food that they eat, that's actually a great point, because I think that is how even ancient Indian systems evolved. Like there's a lot of respect being given to food because it's nourishment for the body, mind, and soul. And likewise, when you do that, that becomes an engagement which can again be practiced in other things that we do, like even drinking water, that can become a ritual, eating food. You have designated places, and then you're making that conscious effort. And by becoming conscious, you're actually becoming aware. And that awareness is what eventually leads to conscious living. And this conscious effort, I think, is what makes people realize the importance of what we are and how we are currently placed or positioned. And gratitude, when it comes to gratitude, there are no dearth of reasons for us not to be thanking ourselves or the Almighty for that matter. Because by virtue of being alive and being healthy, that is the greatest gift, I guess, given that the situation that we are facing. And to maintain that and to appreciate it would be the biggest responsibility that we have. And by us being responsible, that will actually pass on to and become a movement, at least within our own circle. And then I think that is how societies function. So it's great to have your opinion, Devyani, and I appreciate your time and effort. And I thank you so much for all the information that you gave. I wish you all the best and take care. Stay safe and Jai Hind.
Thank you so much.